But without further ado, I will introduce our speakers today. So we've got with us Claire Mallon-Gray, who's the Queensland State Manager for Canteen. And she leads a team of social workers, counsellors and educators who provide individual and peer support for young people and parents who've been impacted by cancer. She's a qualified counsellor and mental health practitioner with over 15 years experience in the education and health sectors. So thank you for joining us, Claire. And we've also got Shae Chester, who is the National Community Educator for Canteen Australia. Shae is based in Tasmania and has worked with Canteen for 11 years across many different roles, including working directly with young people and families and health professionals in both programs, support and education. Shae is passionate about educating communities to support more young people and their families when they're impacted by cancer and other illnesses. So Claire and Shae will both be sharing with us and the group some practical strategies to manage clients who are in distress. And they've taken into account the prior session that we've run with Sancha and Carrie Lethborg and taken on board some of the case studies and feedback that the different organisations have submitted prior to today. So with that, I will hand over to Shae and Claire to kick us off.
Thanks, Catherine. What I'm going to do is share my screen. So I did do a test run of this, but just in case, if I can get a bit of a hands up that you can see the practical strategies on the screen. Yep, I'm getting some nods, so that's a good start. So what I'm wanting to share with you today, we're just going to go through this. And before we get started, but also wanted to take the time to acknowledge the Year of the Nurse and Midwife, because I know that there is quite a few nurses that are participating as part of this and potentially midwives, and acknowledging the amazing work that you all do. So thank you for the work that you do, particularly at this time. I'm going to, in today's session, we're going to be covering off on, I'll just talk a little bit very briefly about Canteen in case you're not aware of what we do and what we've learned from our experiences. Claire's going to go through some 3 practical strategies to manage clients in distress. And we will, throughout and at the end, hopefully have time for questions. As Catherine said, feel free to put the questions in the chat section, and we'll do our best to answer them. And if we don't get to it in today's session, we can always send an email through or something back through Lisa, so you can get any answers that you're wanting. Or if we need to follow up on things, we can do that then. So just to get started, Canteen, we work with young people aged 12 to 25. Those that have, a lot of people don't know that the majority of the young people we work with have a parent with cancer. We work with young people who have cancer themselves or have had cancer themselves, working with young people who are dealing with their siblings' cancer, or those young people that are coping with the death of a parent or a sibling. And we're also now supporting parents, particularly around the support for them about communicating about their cancer with their children. So ultimately what we found is that if we weren't supporting the whole family, then the young people weren't fully supported as well. So that's why we're now moving into a little bit of parent support as well. All of our support services are free, and we do have a range of services. They're programs that are tailored for our young people, and that might be counselling programs, other services, digital options. So I'm not going to go into full details of that today because we're here to run the session for you, but you can jump on to www.canteen.org.au to see what all of our services are, and we do have some other information throughout and can share that with you. One other area, which is my new role, so I've been at Canteen, as I said, for 11 years and had been the State Manager of Tasmania for 5, but I've just moved into a new role, which is community education. And what we're doing is it's being funded through Metricon, and we're just looking at new areas of how do we educate the community so that the young people and families that we're working with are better supported in their own communities. So we're doing some work with students and schools so that other students and friends can be better supported if their friends are impacted or at the school. We're working with school professionals, teachers, social workers, chaplains, principals around how they can better support students that are within their school community. We're doing health professional education, similar to what we're doing here today. And also we're moving into a new area, which is parenting through illness. So this is around, you know, we learn that parenting through cancer is our area that we've moved into, but a lot of the work we're doing is around communication and supporting that family dynamics, and that can be across other areas as well as cancer. So I'm going to hand over to Claire now, and just going to be sharing a little bit about some stories and cases that we've heard. And before I do, I'm going to go back and forth from sharing our screens because we want to be able to see you as well in this session. So I'm just going to go back. Sorry. I'm just going to bring that back up. Just to connect you with a little bit of the work that we've been doing, a lot of our staff that are working with young people have been hearing lots of stories that are going on at the moment, particularly with COVID-19 and the pandemic. And I just wanted to share some of the stories that we've heard from our staff that are working with these young people. We recently had a young person whose mother died in May, and they're turning 18 this month, and they're currently living alone. So it's a huge milestone birthday. They've got no family or social support with the current restrictions, and they're still grieving the recent loss of their mum. So, you know, added to what's going on, they had that impact during COVID as well. The young person's parent died in an aged care, and they had the dual diagnosis of cancer and dementia. So they were unable to see their parent in the lead up to their death due to restrictions on visitors in aged care. So this is some of the things that I'm sure that you're hearing as well from your feedback. We also had a parent who is now unable to access a possible curative clinical trial option due to being put on hold, and he feels he can no longer tell his children he did everything in his power to be with them, and he's worried that the ongoing complexity this might have on their grieving processes. So these are just three examples that we'd had recently that have been shared with us, so about some of the stories that our staff are hearing, and I'm sure that you guys are hearing lots as well. To you, Claire.
Yeah. Did you want to stop sharing?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. I guess what we've heard from our staff and other support teams is that, you know, the real immense complexity that COVID is causing people who are dealing with cancer. And we've heard some case examples from some of you. We're really seeing this coronavirus anxiety, which is quite pervasive and is exacerbating all other losses and conditions. And I know you'd be seeing this on the ground. And so people are really struggling to manage their distress and anxiety in lockdown, particularly in Victoria. And there are ways that people are trying to mitigate this anxiety. And that's, you know, we're seeing an increase in alcohol and drugs, and unfortunately seeing an increase in suicide rates, which a lot of you would be aware of. And so we're seeing these trauma responses, and, you know, a lot of the freeze response, which I guess there's really nothing that we can do about this pandemic. And so there's a lot of that feeling of helplessness that goes with us. And so some of the impact that we have noticed that our staff are experiencing, and certainly a lot of you might be experiencing too, is that we're hearing people say, I don't always feel like I'm affecting change in people's situations. It's very time consuming. I feel guilty about cutting the session short. I start to second guess myself and wonder if just listening is enough. Questions such as, how do I continue to support people and still remain within my role? And I'm worried that I will say the wrong thing and make things worse. We hear that a lot. And also, I'm not a counsellor, and sometimes I'm not sure what to say to refer people to the appropriate service. So there's a little reaction button at the bottom there. If any of you have felt like this in any way, if you just want to give me a thumbs up, because I know, you know, a lot of people have been feeling it. So yeah, okay, great. All right, so we're all in the same boat. And so our hope for the session today is an opportunity to not only share some practical strategies in response to some of the difficulties that we are experiencing working with people that have cancer and are in a pandemic, but I guess to realize the joint sense of purpose and community that we have in coming together across many cancer organizations. So Shae and I feel very privileged to be here today. And yeah, we just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, we're all very, you know, time poor at the moment and going through our own personal things. And so coming together like that, I guess inspiring each other and realizing that we're all really on the same boat. So with that, I thought I'd share this little story that some of you are probably very aware of, and it's got cheese all dripping over it, but I had to share it. So just don't mind me, but it's basically the tale of the starfish. And you would have heard this before, but a young girl was walking along a beach upon which thousands of starfish had been washed up during a terrible storm. And when she came to each starfish, she would pick it up and throw it back into the ocean. People watched with amusement. She'd been doing this for some time when a man approached her and said, "Little girl, why are you doing this? Look at this beach. You can't save all these starfish." And then she looked up at the man and replied, "Well, I made a difference to this one." And the old man looked at the girl inquisitively and thought about what she had done and said. And inspired, he joined the little girl in throwing the starfish back into the sea. And soon others joined and all the starfish were saved. And I know it's a really little story, but I guess there's probably the moral of that story is twofold. The first one is that never underestimate the difference that you're making to so many people's lives and the ripple effect that you're having on communities because you show up for others. Particularly in the helping profession, we're giving so much of ourselves to others. And so I guess that was the one reminder that I wanted to give you today. And the second one is that there's really something powerful about organizations and colleagues that come together to support each other and join in the cause to help others and quite literally save people's lives. So I'll leave that with you just as a little something to start off with. So we can, if you want to share the screen again, Shae, we'll kick off with our 3 strategies. So the first one that we're going to look at today, and because of time, we only had, I guess, 3 main ones that we wanted to cover. But number 1 is to normalize your response. Number 2 is manage the expectations of your role. And 3, apply the cures model, which is a framework that we use when we support in supporting other people. So we're going to just take you through each strategy. So the first one, normalize your response. And we cannot go any further without a meme. This always makes me laugh so much. And the second one is, when people ask how life is going, yep, everything's just great. So I guess the first point I want to say with the strategy and normalizing is to actually remind yourself that you're not working from home, that you're at a home during a crisis trying to work. And I think what we often forget is that that we're actually living and working in a pandemic. And I guess, you know, I don't know about you, but I think for many of us in our roles, we felt that helplessness and powerless to support our clients during this time. And we felt alone and isolated or stuck, or we've been anxious, or we've been sad. We've missed connecting physically with our loved ones and our friends. And so I guess in response to a pandemic, our responses are actually very normal. We're having a normal response to an abnormal event. And our clients and the people that we talk to, their responses are normal. So, you know, our clients who have had cancer, who've had their world changed, and even more with the restrictions, have felt a sense of powerlessness and sense of not having control, or the ability to make even the smallest of changes. And haven't we all at some point felt similar to some of the people that we've been supporting and talking to? So I guess this strategy is really around normalizing your response. And, you know, you will feel powerless at times and not able to help like you would normally do in your role. And to just normalize these responses and actually give yourself permission to be okay with those feelings might relieve you from some of the pressure and exhaustion that you've been feeling in the last few months. Does anyone sort of resonate with that? I know we sometimes forget that we actually need to normalize our own responses and how we, okay, great, yeah. Shae, did you want to go to the next slide? I wanted to show, this is sort of from a grief and loss, one of the grief and loss models, but what I wanted to show you is that the greater the gap between the world that was and the world that is, the greater the suffering. And so, you know, there are multiple losses. So, you know, even when we work with people that have cancer, the primary loss might be that they have cancer, but there's secondary losses that are associated with that, you know, losing their function or identity or a job or way of being. And so there are multiple layers of losses. And then with the pandemic, what it was like before COVID and now what it is like now. And so the greater the gap between the world that was and how it is right now, the greater the suffering. And so even for ourselves, you know, things have changed dramatically for myself and my role and, you know, my family. Like I've got a little nephew on the way in a couple of days, and just even small things like that, the world that was, the world that is, and how we actually are all going through a grief and loss process. And so if you even asked yourself the question, if I said to you, what have you lost? And you gave me an example, but then I asked it again and asked it again. If I ask you 8 to 10 times, you will probably come up with a multiple losses, and realizing that loss upon loss. Yeah. So, yeah, do you want to go to the next slide, Shae? The next strategy is to manage the expectations in your role. And sometimes we actually place very high expectations on ourselves. You know, we don't want to let people down. We don't want to be just seen to be fobbing people off. You know, when they tell us their story, you know, people that we talk to and support have expectations of us. And sometimes those expectations are actually not within the description of our role. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you around the strategy is to ask yourself what is within your reasonable duty of care and the responsibility of your role. Because when we get stressed in our jobs, it's usually when we are operating outside our role, if that makes sense. So when we're clean and clear around what support we can provide within our role, we're more likely to make that warm referral to another source of support for our clients, because I guess at the end of the day, your role will actually protect you from taking too much on. And so you're more likely to refer and not feel bad about it because you're clear that, for example, your role is not to be a counsellor. And so whilst you provide tailored emotional support and practical assistance, you know that there's boundaries around your role, and that actually protects you. So the next slide is really around the continuum of care. And what we see here is on the one side is that real overconnection, where, and some people say, well, how can you care too much? Well, in some ways, I guess we can. I know when I was, you know, in the early years of my role as a counsellor, I was a rescuer, and I wanted to fix and solve people's problems and come in on my white horse with a cape flapping in the wind. And I was really overconnected in some ways, and that caused a lot of stress for me because I took on a lot. And so without even knowing it, I was actually enabling clients. And I guess whatever the other person is refusing to do for him or herself, that's exactly what the rescuer will do. And so you've got that on the one side, and then the other side, we've got that caring too little, and that's that, you know, real disconnection and feeling burnt out. So I don't know about you guys, but I know in my field with counselling, you know, we've got a lot of colleagues that are burnt out, and they almost become quite cynical and, you know, irritable of people and their problems, and negative, and can have a real callous attitude. And so what we really want is that sort of, you know, that in between where we've got these healthy boundaries, and we're not overconnected, we're not disconnected, but we're really connected, and we're actually operating within our role. So just some reminders here, you can only act within your reasonable duty of care. Always come back to your role and what is within your scope of practice. And the best practitioners are those that know when to refer, not the ones that know all the answers and try and fix things that are actually not within their role. So that was just a reminder to us, today. So that's strategy 2. The third one, and we're going to spend a bit of time on this and get some sort of interaction between the group, but this is a framework using the acronym CURES. And so we'll start off with the first step, which is connect. And so this is a framework that you can use just in supporting the people that you speak to and support and help. So really around connection, that's about connecting people to you, you know, to themselves, their body, their experiences, and connecting them to context, the facts, information about what they really need. And so you can't, I guess, really, I suppose, help someone unless there is that connection and there's that rapport and relationship. And that leads to the second step, which is really around understanding. And to understand the people that we support, that's really around using whole body listening, getting to hear their experience. And so what we're doing in step 1 and step 2 of connect and understand is that we're actually using all our micro skills, which is, you know, the head nodding, if we're in person, the I can hear what you're saying. So what I've heard you say is, and then summarizing what they've said. So reflecting back to them what they've heard, what you've heard them say. And you kind of can't really go to the next step, which is our response, unless you do have that connection understanding. And a lot of us have been on the receiving end. I don't know about you, but sometimes I've had friends or colleagues in my life where I've rung and I've told them maybe a little bit about what's happening for me. And then after 2 sentences, they've jumped in and said, I know exactly what you need to do. I know how you to fix it. And I guess it's quite, it can be quite deflating in some way, because you still need to tell your story. And so those 2 steps are really important, because when you get to the response, this is when you're giving practical assistance, you're normalizing feelings and experiences. So the next one is engage others. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the responses we can give in validating people's experiences and showing empathy, but also some of the things that we can say to refer people on to the appropriate service. So some of the unhelpful responses, and I'm sure many of us have heard this or maybe even said it ourselves at some point, but simple reassurances such as, I know how you feel, or you'll be okay, or I understand what it's like for you, or don't feel bad, or time will heal. That's a big one. You're strong. It could have been worse. And I guess any sentence that we start with at least kind of can be a little bit insensitive. So I don't know if some of you have watched Brené Brown's little clip on empathy, you know, the difference between empathy and sympathy. But most sympathetic responses actually start with at least. Well, at least you're not living in America. That would be quite a perspective, you know, give some perspective, but anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. But I guess whenever we start a sentence with at least, it's always not gonna go down too well from my experience. Starting conversations, so things like the last time we spoke, it sounded like things are really upsetting for you. How have you been lately? I've noticed that you've not seen yourself. I'm asking because I'm concerned about you. And this is where we're really doing that connect, understand, and respond by reflecting back to them. So what I'm hearing is blah. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, and you do this every day in conversations with people. The next one is around empathy. So I'm so sorry to hear that this is happening for you. I'm so glad you have reached out for support. It can be a really difficult thing to do. I can't even imagine what you're going through right now. Oh, and then the person's saying, that sounds so hard. I can only imagine how difficult this must be for you. And so some of you already are using these phrases and ways of showing empathy. And so this will probably affirm some of your practice, or there might be a few little lines that you pick up today that you might be able to use moving forward. Given what you've been through, it sounds like you're having a very normal response. Sometimes we really underestimate the power of just saying that to someone, that what you're going through is actually really normal, given the situation. Being sad and upset is okay. You're grieving not only what has happened, but what has not happened, which can be really powerful. And again, those loss upon loss for people that are in situations in the pandemic. This next one is really around giving you some, I guess, phrasing to refer or direct people to the appropriate service. So something to say like, it sounds like it's really important for you to get some extra support for all of this. Can I give you some options? And don't be afraid to say this. As I'm not a trained counselor, I want to get you in contact with someone who can best help you. it sounds like things are really hard right now and I want you to get the support you need. That in itself is such a beautiful line, because what you're doing is you're actually, you're giving a boundary of your role, and you're saying, this is what I can offer, but you're actually very gently referring them to the right person. Can I give you the number of someone that can help you? I'm really sorry, I'm not qualified to provide the extra kind of emotional support you need. I think it's really important that you get the right help. When we finish up, can you call that service? Are you okay to stay with me while we work out the best way to support you? Particularly when people, have suicidal thoughts or wanting to harm themselves, those sort of last little lines there can be really helpful. And are you okay for me to get in touch with your emergency contact person or another support person to let them know we've had this conversation and I'm concerned for you? So these are just some little ways, some little phrasing. I call it the cheat sheet. And sometimes it's just good to have it even printed out on an A4 sheet. And if you feel like you kind of, wanting to do that warm referral or gently sort of wrap the conversation up or, direct them to the appropriate service, this can be quite helpful. Shae.
I was still muted. So we wanted to have a bit of interaction here. Like, it's always hard but on a afternoon watching a webinar. So thinking about what we've just shared, and we will share, just so you know, we are going to share this PowerPoint, both the webinar video and also the actual PowerPoint slides with you later, so you don't have to take heaps of notes. But it'd be really good to hear from you what are some of the helpful things that you've said in the past, so you can share within this group, oh, I use this phrasing, this really lands well, this is what I've done. And you could put this in the chat option, or if you'd like to, raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and speak into the room if you'd like to do that. Maybe also, what is something unhelpful that someone may have said to you? And again, it's also sharing this knowledge that is in the room already. And perhaps early in career, or sometimes that comes out of your mouth and you're like, oh, that just landed like a lead balloon. What is something that you've said and you're like, how do I bring that back? But also, how do you acknowledge it? How do you say something and then even just be a real person in the time and go, that didn't quite come out how I was hoping to, or how did you notice that it didn't come out, for the person on the thing? So I just thought it might be good to spend a couple of minutes on getting some knowledge from within the room so you can hear other people's experiences that they've had. So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen so I can see all your lovely faces or names, and check the chat option, or if you would like to, feel free to unmute yourself and have a think about what might be good to share within the group today.
I'll say something quickly.
Brave you, Hayley. Well done.
Hayley from Ovarian Cancer Australia. And I think that a good normaliser that I use all the time is actually lots of women who I talk to feel that way. Like that's
yes, yeah,
is often a good one. And then that's just a way of normalising. There was something else that I was going to say as well, but it's gone. But so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's absolutely a fantastic way. So then, we do that a lot with our young people or our families. We say, oh, lots of young people your age have experienced this. Have you ever felt that? Or they'll say something just so it gives them a chance to acknowledge, oh, okay, what I'm feeling is normal. Other people have felt that way as well.
I also use a lot correct me if I'm wrong. Like if this doesn't sound right for you, like that. I think that's a good one as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Kerry?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a breast cancer nurse. When I first meet a patient, whether they're newly diagnosed or it's my first episode of care with them, I always ask them what's their story. So I say, tell me your story. And I find that releases the patient to tell me what's most important to them. And often it's not their cancer diagnosis. They will tell me that they're a mum or a wife or what they do for work. And you sort of, then you can work out how their diagnosis is impacting on their life.
Absolutely. It's like, is it their defining moment at the moment that they are somebody with breast cancer or they've got breast cancer? Like, you know, it's definitely, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Kerry.
Hi, it's Ricky. I was going to say I love that quote at the beginning, the greater the gap between the world that was and the world that is the greater the suffering. I think it's just so powerful and really highlights, you know, when someone's, because I work at Breast Cancer Network Australia, and when someone's diagnosed with breast cancer or diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, their whole world obviously is quite different today than it was yesterday. But working on the helpline too, I think it's really been, I guess, a really good education in terms of active listening, because before I hadn't worked on the helpline, well, only the last couple of years. And so you've got all those visual cues that you kind of help you quite a lot with how people are feeling. So it really does actually develop your active listening skills and really teaches you to sit back and not speak, to allow them actually to speak and really articulate, because they ring up and they really do want to talk and they want an opportunity just to talk freely. So, and I think I take the points about, you know, checking in with them constantly and just checking in, is this what I'm hearing? Is this what you're saying? Am I correct in saying that you're saying this? You know, that kind of thing. I think they're really great, helpful points. So thank you.
Hi, it's Madeline from Sydney. I'm a blood cancer coordinator for the Leukemia Foundation. Something that actually works for me is, and I try to normalise as much as possible, is a simple statement as, when I'm first introduced to someone and there's a new referral, tell me about it. And they just automatically just open up. And it's so normalising, just tell me about it. As simple as that. And it hasn't failed me yet. So, my bit. Thank you.
Thanks. Some other people have put, I'm just reading the chat as well at the same time. So, you know, that using their actual life to normalise and recognise all the stresses, permission statements that are important in building, in helping build that trust. And in COVID, the accepting silence time to respond important, as we cannot actually see. So a few of our cues are lost, absolutely. So tricky on the phone. You know, we do have Zoom technology for some people, but not everybody has access to that. So being able to pick up cues, whether you're texting or like for you on the phone, and actually trying to know when to jump in and when they're actually still formulating their thoughts, it is a really tricky one, because you don't want to start going on to the next point or just not giving them a chance to really think through. So it's always that you know, thinking of phrases that you could say, you know, after a bit of silence to see if you're wanting to move on as well is also something that could be helpful. Yeah, definitely, Jolene. You know, identifying, is it okay to talk now or plan a time? Yeah, that's a really good point. Because you can start and they're distracted by something else that's going on, and they really want to talk about what you've just brought up for them, but it might not be the right time. And, you know, all of a sudden they were okay to talk, but then someone's walked into the room or something else is going on that's distracted them. And, you know, they're like, oh, I really want to have that proper thought through that, or, you know, being able to come back to you.
And Shae, it's Catherine. I know many people on this call are the people that have taught me these kinds of skills, but I know one of the ones that I miss hearing when we're actually in the office together, but I know the team use a lot, especially during these really complex times when people have so many things that are going on, and you might have used the distress screen and, you know, to try and get a sense of where things are at. But I think what I really love is when people use those statements around, you know, I can hear that there's so much going on for you right now. And it speaks to Kerry's point about tell me your story and tell me where it all fits together for you right now. But just using those simple statements around, you know, you've given me a lot there that we can work through. what's most important to you? If I could help you with one thing to start with, or where would you like me to start, or what would be most helpful for you to be able to get out of this today? Because it can feel so overwhelming, as you said, and to want to be able to fix everything for these people in these really challenging times. But sometimes being able to say to them, and not assuming that you know where you might start, getting them to tell you what they want most just gives you a point where it's like, yep, I can start with that. Let's go from there. And, you know, I've made some notes and I'll come back to them, but let's start there is something that I've always found really useful if things are starting to feel a bit overwhelming.
Absolutely. We can always assume what we think people want to, like, you know, feel is the most important thing for them, but just giving them the chance. They can then have that time to go, actually, what is bothering me the most? They might not have stopped. They might just be so overwhelmed with everything that's going on that they actually haven't even taken the time to think what is the most pressing thing that could make their life a little bit easier right at the moment. Excellent. Does anybody else want to share before we move on?
I was just going to add to, like Joylene made a really good point before about checking to make sure it was an okay time to, you know, talk about whatever it was. We can't see who can overhear, even if we're in a Zoom call, we can't see who can overhear the conversation. And I know for me, I work at home normally, but my house doesn't usually have 6 million people in every room, it feels like. So I know that's really similar at the moment for our patients as well. They've often got many more people around their home than they may be used to, and so privacy can be at a premium. But the other thing that I just find sometimes helpful with people is around setting expectations for the conversation. So if I've got heaps of time, you know, I might say, you know, okay, yeah, we can talk for as long as we need to, or it might be that I know that I've got a meeting in 20 minutes and I might say to them, look, you know, I've got about 20 minutes now when we can talk, but if we need to make a time at the end of that to, you know, come back to things, then we can do that. So just so that they've got a bit of a roadmap of what to expect from that interaction, I think can be really helpful in setting expectations so that they're not caught short by me truncating things before they're ready to really finish. So yeah,
absolutely. Setting expectations is one of the key areas, I guess, with working with anybody, isn't it? And, you know, that's a great point. And thinking about the COVID times where a lot of people are working from home or taking phone calls at home, and letting them know that that's okay if they get interrupted as well is a good thing. Like, because sometimes I've been talking to people and they're like, oh my God, my dog's barking. Oh, sorry, my kid's just running. Oh, I've just got a text message. And you're like, it's okay, we get it. Like, we're all in similar situations, in this setting of trying to work from home or living our life and still working. So letting them know that we understand that distractions happen and that's okay as well. Fantastic. We might move on, Claire, to the last strategy, which we passed over briefly because we wanted to come share that with you and come back to this.
I know we've got about 5 minutes left, so time flies.
Yeah.
So the last step on that cures model is self-care, and I know that you talked about this in your last session, but more than ever, this really cannot be overstated. And that whole analogy with the mask, oxygen mask, putting it on ourselves before we help others. I know it's something that's used a lot, but I really wanted to emphasize that again. The next slide talks about having recovery activities, and I guess really realizing that sustainability requires that you have recovery time daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. And I didn't have an elastic band with me, but I was going to show you, with an elastic band, every time you sort of, pull it, it eventually snaps. But if you're having that, you're getting pulled, but then you've got recovery time, you're able to, I guess, have sustainability in your role. The other question I like to throw in around recovery activities is do they nourish or numb? And that's something really important to have in the back of your mind when you're using coping mechanisms. You've got your self-care plan. Are these activities actually nourishing me or numbing me? And yeah, I think there's no judgment here. We've all we've all sort of had to cope and manage, and I guess to be really, really mindful of that. The last slide that I wanted to show you is just around this I guess idea of buoyant well-being, and you can see in the one picture, the first picture of the lighthouse, obviously it doesn't move and it's sort of just copping a beating there in the storm, but rather than resist or deflect waves, a buoy moves with them. And I was reading an article the other day about probably one of the most important skills as someone on the front line is really around your ability to work within uncertainty and not having the answers and not being able to plan 5 steps ahead. And so there's this whole idea of buoyancy, and in stormy weather it gets buffeted more than when it is calm, but the buoy never gets swept away. And this stability is achieved because it is tethered to and grounded by an anchor. And so just to really, I guess, have a think about, whilst our natural levels of buoyancy and the weight of our personal anchors are unique to us, they are not fixed. We can all proactively influence our ability to move with, but not get swept away by the challenges and opportunities we face each day. So, yeah, thank you.
We will have some time for questions just before we move on to the last couple of minutes with questions. For those, you are working on the phones and hearing stories, and you may not have known about Canteen before this. You may be well versed in Canteen already. But we do provide a service for young people and parents. So we have canteenconnect.org.au, which is an online space. We've now got an app where young people can go on, they can chat to a counsellor, they can read stories, they can chat to other young people, and it's about that connection. They meet other young people all across Australia that do actually understand what they're going through. Again, their stories aren't exactly the same, but they feel heard and they can get support from each other, which is a fantastic opportunity. And we also have our Canteen Connect for parents as well. So our parent space, they can also go on there and chat to a counsellor, as well as talk to other parents that are impacted by cancer, whether it's their own, their partner or a child. So these are just some of the services that we do have. And, referring to a Canteen is quite easy. You can do it through our website or just canteen.org.au/refer. And it's just you can type in details that you have, getting permission from the person, and then one of our staff will be in contact with that person within 1 to 2 business days as well. So just so you are talking on the line, to people that are impacted by cancer. And at the moment, with this extra complexity of the pandemic and COVID, the more that we can support people at this time or connect them with others that not only are feeling isolated, but maybe going through a cancer experience, then we want to be able to support them as well. So just wanted to share that with you now. And I'm going to stop sharing because I can see there's some chat coming through. And if anybody has any questions or any comments they'd like to share with us.
If you do need to go though, please feel free. I know that's 6 o'clock.
So I'm just going to read out the comments. So from Andrew, self-care, really important for leaders to lead by example in this space. Absolutely. That's something, having been a manager, a estate manager here, I was always trying to lead by example as well, because if I was feeling myself getting, telling the staff, you should be doing this, look after yourself, but then I wasn't, then they're not going to feel permission to do that as well. So absolutely, Andrew, thanks for sharing that. The analogy, Giovanna, was that the buoy and the holding
Lighthouse.
down the lighthouse. Yeah, it was fantastic as well. Thank you, Bridget, for that. So if anybody wants to either type or take themselves off mute if there was any other comments or anything else that you feel would be really helpful for these sorts of sessions, feel free to jump in. Oh, thanks, Joylene. Knowing that those that have been referred have found it beneficial and made the journey less treacherous. Having worked at Canteen for 11 years, I've heard so many different stories of those young people or parents now that actually, you know, feel like they're understood, like their friends don't know what to do and they feel even more isolated. So being able to provide them with a bit of support or connection to others is really great. To refer a parent to Canteen, do they have to have kids? No, actually, the parent space isn't, they don't have to have children between 12 and 24. The children could be younger than that or older than that. It's not for the parent space because they are parenting through that. Thank you, everybody, for your lovely comments. They're all coming through. And thanks for sharing useful information and validating the work we're all doing. Yeah, we're absolutely in awe of the work that you guys do because it's such an important space, and thinking about, you know, if you're not there to pick up the phone, that person's sitting at home or wherever they are and feeling even more isolated. So the work, even if it's only a 5-minute conversation, you're picking up the phone and actually making them feel heard, which is just incredible, whilst dealing with your own isolation potentially or other things going on for families. So thank you for all the work that you guys do as well.